been doing good work so far. You you give me a lot to correct. I'm trying to keep up as best I can with the corrections and getting work back to you. So I'll have to do another round of grading in the next day or so. So yeah, we're almost, actually no, we're almost, today's Thursday. We're really 2 weeks done, and that last week is short, so we're almost halfway done with the class. Certainly continue to, if you have questions or concerns or anything you have to ask me, throw it my way. Email is the best, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. All right, so tonight's topic I thought was interesting for a classic curriculum development because it's a current issue, and it wasn't something I'd originally planned on. I was looking for like current issues in New Jersey with curriculum, and I came across the issues in the Chathams that started last year, and I thought that would be a good discussion point. So I gave you a bunch of videos to watch, some news articles. The Chathams got a lot of attention. Anybody want to provide maybe like a 30-second synopsis of all the stuff you've seen and read and what's going on in the Chathams? Anybody? What's the main problem or perceived problem in the Chathams?
Clyde. Yeah. I
Hi,
think
Clyde,
one of the biggest. All right. One of the issues that was happened was I think the two parents thought that the curriculum was trying to indoctrinate Islam into their students, their children, and apparently they got together and came to the board meeting in the first instance, and then for some reason when it became a public thing and national, the following week the board meeting got blown up into a larger one where most people came in support of the curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a perfect synopsis. We've got two parents who felt that their children were being indoctrinated and forced to study Islam, and exactly, and there's a lot of interesting things that aren't said, but for example, where did they what news channel picked up the mother's cry for attention,
Fox News.
which is known to be what?
Conservative.
Sure. So now we have, already we're looking at this with some measurable amount of bias, because, and if it was CNN or MSNBC, you'd say that it was, the opposite end of the spectrum. It would be liberal.
Yeah.
So we've got it's gotten media attention. I watched that board meeting where everybody got to speak, and I thought that was really interesting. And the one comment I thought was great was that we can't get more than 5 people at a regular board meeting, but why can't we get all these people all the time? So let me find where's my questions. Let's start off generic. For those of you that are teaching right now, how is curriculum supervised in your school, and how do you submit lesson plans? Are your lesson plans approved? Do you have to submit lesson plans? What's curriculum supervision like in your school?
We have weekly departmental meetings. We meet one period a week, and we have a collaborative piece where department by department we all get together and share our ideas, and we have a generic plan which we're free to deviate from as long as it's totally aligned with the curriculum, which is pretty much revised almost every year. Mm-hmm. Not literally, but for the most part. They look it over in the summertime when we have a hand-picked curriculum committee by department at the high school level, and they make whatever revisions need to be made according to testing standards and whatever we need to revise and revid it according to what we need to improve upon, according to the previous year's testing data.
Okay. Other people, how's curriculum supervised?
My school, I teach in a private school in Teaneck, and we have students. It's a small high school. We have, I know Professor knows this because I've been in 3 classes already, so he's probably heard this, but we have students from both New Jersey and New York. So our curriculum standards are, I mean, while they're similar to New York and New Jersey, it's still, they're 2 different sets of standards. So we have to abide by 2 different sets, two different state curriculum standards. So it's a little bit different. Like when Park is going on, our New York students don't have to test, and our New Jersey students are. So it's kind of chaotic a little bit in our school, but just it's a little bit different than probably where a lot of you guys are teaching and working.
Certainly. So having 1 set of standards is bad enough, let alone having 2. That could be challenging. Anybody else? Anybody?
Well, I know.
You can go. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. So in my school, we have common planning time, and I teach science. So part of the science department duties are we meet every other day, every B day. So sometimes 2 days or 3 days a week for 45 minutes to plan lessons together. And we follow a curriculum that is also modified every summer. And I happen to be on that committee that's been making modifications for the past 3 years to the biology, anatomy, physiology, and environmental curriculum. So teaching that curriculum is I'm part of the creation or modification team. So we adhere closely to it, but we can also deviate off of lessons as long as it brings in all of the standards that are required.
Okay.
So I teach at a Catholic school, and basically the curriculum in general is very new. It's not more than maybe 4 years old, maybe less. And basically there's a curriculum for English and language arts, and there's one for mathematics, and there's a fairly new, and maybe within the last few months, one for technology. Everything else is kind of open to the teacher. For example, social studies, as we're dealing with. Technology was just brought in, but prior to that, it was kind of the teacher's choice. However, our plan books are submitted every week. So the principal does, and it's not just checked by anyone, the principal herself goes and checks every plan book to see what's being taught, and will make notes to say, oh, good, or maybe something else. And everything that's presented to students in general, even if it is a video, even if it is 1 minute, is run by the principal. We must ask her for permission first. So everything is pre-approved.
Okay. Anybody else have that situation where you have to have your stuff pre-approved?
I was in a Catholic school too. Our stuff had to be handed in, but nothing I don't think was ever really looked at too closely.
Okay.
But I'm also in a different situation because I teach religion. So there is like no really curriculum. There isn't really, it's seen as the subject where you figure it out on your own and flip questions at the back end. So I'm kind of a different kind of system, I guess.
Caitlin, before I ask you your question, you're gonna have to get closer to your microphone. I can hardly hear you. But okay. Do you have a mandate? Did you go through the mandate process?
No.
Okay, because I know right when I taught religion when I was teaching full time. I had religion and computer science, and that was right before that bishop's mandate. You had to have a mandate in order to teach religion. Curriculum when I was teaching religion, I was given the textbook. Like here's the curriculum, here's the textbook, and pretty much as long as it had God in it, it was fine. But there was, and that was. It's interesting you say that, because if you're in a Catholic school, while yes, I think the Catholic schools have gotten better, or the U.S. bishops have gotten better in terms of a standard curriculum, but religion in some ways can be your theology can be a free for all. in terms of what you teach. But at the same time, also not much room, even though you've got leeway, you've got no leeway because there's, you kind of have to stay on track. There's really, you could lose your job if you teach the wrong thing. It's one of the few subject areas where, deviation is from the norm is not encouraged. Okay, so I'm hearing some of you have formal curricula, some of you don't. So for those of you that don't have a formal curriculum, what do you do? How do you come up with curriculum? Because I know some of you are like, yeah, I don't have curriculum for every subject. What do you do?
Follow the textbook, get ideas online.
Okay.
Come up with your own, resources and things like that.
Okay.
I'll say this in a private school where we are following two sets of standards. I'm a phys ed teacher, so it's a little bit more free, as long as our administration kind of feels that as long as our kids, and it's a special ed, the whole school's special ed, so there are IEPs and all types of different things that we have to follow, as well as I'm sure some of you do too. But with phys ed, our administration in the private school kind of just feels like as long as there's some type of physical activity, exercise, something going on, they don't really ruffle our feathers. We're actually the only department, even when it comes to health, in the whole school that does not have to turn in lesson plans. So I feel kind of lucky, but also at the same time, if I ever do leave there, which is my hope, I would be a little bit up the creek without a paddle in terms of doing lesson plans at a public.
Okay. Anybody else without a formal curriculum? Anybody have to kind of fend for themselves?
So something that I found really helpful is that, especially once you're getting older, if you don't have a curriculum when they're younger, but you have a set of things to do, it's, you can keep them engaged. When they're older, it's much more difficult. So the textbooks at the school that I teach at were very outdated, and their information was very not accurate, let's say. And so what I ended up doing is that there's a company, it's called Studies Weekly, and they will allow you to order a whole year's worth of these, let's say, magazines with the curriculum according to your state. And each magazine is 1 week worth of work with writing assignments and everything. And so I just go by that, and it has a guideline for the teacher, for the students. It even has online resources where the student can have an account, and it's very motivational for them. And so since it goes by the state's standards, it's kind of setting its own curriculum in a way. So I don't have a curriculum, but I'm following the standards as well of New Jersey. So I do teach, even though I teach at a Catholic school, the magazines speak about Islam, speak about other things that, however, it is from I believe it was like a Mormon or another type of Christian denomination produces these magazines. So the principal knows that what is being taught there is according to the Catholic, at least according to Christianity. Yeah,
I'm just looking at their website. I never heard of them before, but it's
really good, and it's not just for social studies.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. One of the challenges that I know a lot of schools have is resources. Curricular resources. If you don't have a textbook, or not everybody has a textbook, or you don't have a formal curriculum, what do you teach? And especially if you have teachers, you're teaching outside your content area. Are any of you in a situation where you are teaching, at least depending on what if you're in middle school or higher, are you teaching out of your subject area, area you're certified in, or area that you went to school for?
I wasn't certified in religion. I went to a Catholic college, so I took a few theology courses and a few philosophy courses that were required, but I didn't have a major in religion or theology or anything. So, but I was like a youth minister at my parish, so they threw me into the religion class.
Good enough.
Which is teaching theology and teaching the Bible and teaching scripture is very different from leading youth group. So you kind of have to figure it out on your own, go with the textbook. Pull from other experienced teachers. I think that's key. Talking to your colleagues and getting ideas from them. But, you kind of got to roll with the punches at that point.
Agreed. Anybody else outside their comfort zone, outside their subject area?
I'm not outside my comfort zone, but I can speak to a point when I first started off, I was in a charter school.
Okay.
And they had no curriculum. So what I did was I poached. I kind of went to other websites, other school districts, and looked up science curricula and try to find the best ones. I remember one of the ones I used to use was Tom's River and Garfield for biology. And I used Norfolk for environmental science. I'll just go and use from a well-established district and just pull it in, and that's how I taught. Yeah,
it's the case principle. I have a colleague who calls case. It's copy and steal everything. There's sometimes you look at why reinvent the wheel when you see places that are doing it really good. There's a perfect model for you. And depending on the school you're at, who takes curriculum development seriously, how many times if you ask for curriculum, it might be in a binder that's full of dust. When's the last time it was updated? Do any of you curriculum map? Have anybody ever done curriculum mapping?
Yes.
I see. Yeah, it's becoming a. I don't know if it's a
department.
I'm sorry,
yeah,
Kelly.
We do it as a department.
Yeah, I am. We've been doing it for a couple of years now, and I thought it was going to be a fad. I think it's going to. It's been around since the late '90s, but the idea of of visually mapping out everything that you teach to then look to see from a data standpoint if you're horizontally aligned with the other people that are teaching, and then vertically aligned, are you preparing? Does your class or your course prepare students for the next level? And I have you, then that's your if you will, your final exam is create a curriculum map. But I think that is helpful, though. I don't know, all my colleagues don't agree with me, but to sit down and actually put down on paper everything that I do was extremely helpful. And for me, it was AP Computer Science. So there is no prerequisite for AP Computer Science. But what do I want these kids to know when they're done? And then work backwards and figure out, well, how do I get them there? And to go through and list all my resources and all my teaching strategies, to me, was very helpful. But not every school's like that. You won't get a copy of the curriculum, excuse me, in every place that you go. Let's talk a little bit about deviation from the curriculum. And there's this concept called. Anybody ever hear of the hidden curriculum?
Well,
anybody want to take a stab at what the hidden curriculum is?
I think we read about that.
I think you did.
Yeah, in the book.
Anybody want to take a?
It was definitely like the things that the kids are learning that you're not really intending for them to learn, but they're learning it from being in the classroom.
You're exactly right. Was that Julie? Exactly right. Yeah. Like what?
Like maybe how to treat one another, like the respect issue, things like that.
Okay.
That's not necessarily part of your written curriculum, but they're learning it from being in the classroom.
Absolutely. What else? What else is part of the hidden curriculum? You're on the money. What else is part of that hidden curriculum?
Appropriate behaviors, how to act like in public, in a classroom, like how you act on the playground is different from how you act in the classroom.
Okay, absolutely. What else?
Sometimes social issues, things that may come up that are pertinent in the day-to-day news cycle, or might have, something, for example, to throw one out there, 9/11. I could imagine social studies teachers, or even any teacher on that day or the following days, after that could have really adapted that to classroom work.
Yeah, I like this Ed Glossary definition. Hidden curriculum refers to the unwritten, unofficial, and often unintended lessons, values, and perspectives that students learn in school. And everything you've all said is correct. I want to add one thing, that perspectives.
Yeah, perspectives and certain beliefs, right? When you're going a little sidebar, expounding upon what was maybe unintended, right?
How many of you, anybody teach history, social studies?
Special needs and class support.
Okay, let's anybody social studies. Give me the name of your social studies textbook. Anybody know the name of your social studies textbook? There's a bunch.
We use a couple.
Like a journey through time or something.
Okay. Like, how about specifically, anybody teach U.S. history? Anybody ever taught U.S. history?
Have, yeah.
Yeah, you know, like you have a textbook like Triumph of the American Nation, The Rise of the Republic, you know, the often sometimes that hid curriculum, we don't even realize, like when we teach things, that we are our own opinions come out, you know, our own perspectives on certain issues come out, and that is not necessarily a bad thing, but you know, that's part of the hidden curriculum too, and how we present the curriculum as teachers. Do we present certain things with a bias? Do we? And I know teaching religion, I had to be very careful with this, because there were things where, you know, I'd like to say, yeah, I don't agree with this, I know, and I'm very, I have to walk a very fine. That's probably why I don't teach religion anymore. I managed to get through 2 years somewhat unscathed, but and that was part of it, was the Jesuit influence that I got at St. Peter's. You have to be very careful, even in the ways you teach. Let's say something like math, for example. My son, who's going to 4th grade this year, did everyday math. Anybody elementary teachers do everyday math?
Yeah, we do.
I hate it, and no disrespect, but I hate it, because my son can't tell me 9 times 7 is 63. He has to tell me 9 times, no, how the hell do I do that? 7 plus 2 is 9, so 9 times 5 is 45, plus 9 times 2, 18 equals 63. And he's telling me this, like, but Dad, this is how I learned. I'm like, this is ludicrous. And I'm yelling at him like, this is so wrong. What 9 times 7 is 63? Because when I went to school, sister told me that was 9 times 7 is 63, because I had a table and I had to memorize it.
Yeah.
You know, so as a parent,
if they do it our way, they get it wrong.
Absolutely. As a parent, there's certainly a hidden curriculum, my unintended influences. But I think as a teacher, like, I don't know if I could teach some of these skills in the way that they're being presented, because I look at this and I'm like, this is, I think we were doing subtraction, and we were doing, like, I learned how to carry. You carry numbers over, and apparently it's whatever it was. I was like, I'm like, if I teach you, I think you're going to end up worse. You know, like, it's almost like you have to, even though my wife and I are both trained educators, I'm like, if I teach you how to do this, you're going to get in trouble, because you know, but then you also can't go and tell your teacher what my parents said about the curriculum, because, you know, I'm like, you know, it's crazy in my mind. Now, some people might think this is the best way to teach mathematics. Okay, but I personally don't. But see, look at how my influence, you know, how I could influence the curriculum, you know, and I can influence how the curriculum is taught just because of my personal bias of, well, this isn't how I learned it. You know, now in some cases I don't teach how I learned, but at the same time, you know, as I look at this, at the way that math in particular is presented, I'm concerned, you know, as what is, you know, is my child or my children going to have the necessary skills they need when they hit like the 4th grade or 3rd grade, when they start Park, 4th grade, 8th grade, you know, 12th grade. And that's a big part of hidden curriculum. And I think as teachers, we have to look at ourselves and go, well, what's my unintended curriculum? What do I bring when I teach, you know, and how potentially do I influence, you know, the curriculum that I do teach? All right, so those of you that are going for ed leadership, put on your supervisor hat for a minute. So what would you do if you have a teacher that's deviating from your formal curriculum? And I don't mean a little bit. I mean either not teaching it correctly, using personal bias. How do you handle that?
I think the first thing that you would have to do is find out why they deviated from it, because there's so many reasons that they could do that. I mean, it could be a total lack of understanding, or it could be a total disagreement with the curriculum. And it makes a big difference of how you would handle it based on the answer to that question.
I agree, and let's talk about both those from a content standpoint. I've had to supervise teachers that were non-computer. I've supervised the computer science department for 13 years at Bergen, and I've had teachers that weren't trained in computer science. So it might be I didn't know any better. They don't have the necessary academic background to teach computer science. But also it could be totally intentional as well. I know what your book says. This is how we're going to do it. I know how your book teaches you how to solve a multiplication problem. I don't care. We're doing it my way. Two very different, different situations, but both potentially, either way, the kids aren't getting the actual curriculum. Anybody else? How would you deal with teachers deviating from your formal curriculum?
You definitely have to have like a face-to-face conversation as a supervisor. You need to bring that person in and talk to them, and maybe if it comes down to going over their lessons with them, looking at their lesson plan book, and you're not already doing that, and having that discussion maybe based on an observation, maybe going into the classroom observing, and then in your like feedback post-observation, having that conversation and saying, maybe these are something you need to change going forward, or like you said, getting a rationale as to why they were teaching it that way, but definitely like a face-to-face conversation with an observation so that you have that backup of, I saw this in the classroom and now we're going to discuss it.
Yeah, observation is a key part. And before you can go in and have that discussion, you have to look at the classroom and see where's the deviation happening, and how bad is it. If it's a parent complaint, it's a student complaint, if you hear something, you have to see it for yourself, and then examining, exactly as Caitlin said, looking at the at lesson plans, and maybe having a teacher on a regular basis, you review lesson plans. What are we going to teach, and what are we going to teach today? Teach tomorrow. How are we going to present that material? Are we going to present that material? With direct instruction, with, there are times where teachers, I know, depending on the topic, if they're not totally 100% on it, they might use some video to present the topic, or they might have kids do some type of self-discovery work, where they're constructivist type of stuff. Now,
we in our district, we have, in our building alone, which is a freshman academy, we have 4 administrators, and I mean, just between principal and 3 vice principals or assistant principals, whichever way. Long story short, we have some people, goof in light of it, and they say it's the SWAT squad, and they come around and they make sure that you are adhering to, what is in your lesson plan per se. And long story short, we do have formal, we have informal walkthroughs and observations, and you do receive, I don't know if anyone uses PD 360 in their district. But we do receive written, and we do receive emails and notifications through technology, with some sort of formal praise, informal praise, and there might be some sort of suggestion, maybe if you're a little off task. I'm aware of maybe a person or two in 2 departments who kind of fell into that sort of pattern, and there was some praise, and some nice commentary that was given, but there would be some sort of suggestion or two, which they tried to keep as positive as possible, but they were drifting away from the curriculum, and they did receive these sort of messages pretty much on a weekly basis.
I had a teacher tell me that a couple years ago, that someone, like an administrator, went in and asked the kids what standard they were learning, because they had to write the standard on the board, and if they didn't have a standard on the board, it was like the teacher got punished if the kids didn't know what standard they were learning. There are some that are take this stuff very seriously.
We have that too. And the the administrator will actually come and circulate around the classroom for about a minute, and then maybe they'll sit next to a child for about another minute, and they'll just simply ask them, if you could tell me in your own words, what are you guys actually learning today? Because I really don't understand, just to see what type of feedback the student will provide.
Sure.
And see how it matches up with the daily objective in the lesson plan.
And there are some times when I observe teachers, I do the same thing. I'll say, yeah, exactly. And I like the way you put that, Kelly, is, well, tell me, what are you learning? And if a kid can't tell you, there's potentially an issue there that you might have to look at. So I gave you a lot of information about the Chathams, some video, some biased news, one way or the other. I gave you some the cartoon. So do we think, based on everything that you read, was there an attempt by the school district of the Chathams to indoctrinate their kids?
I don't believe so. I think it was pretty informative. I don't think that they were trying to present any sort of biased influence whatsoever.
Okay.
I tried to take a step back and consider if I was presenting it from a Christian perspective per se, and if I was behind the scenes, considering whether there was any bias, if I was behind this project or this presentation. And I just thought that they were being as informative as possible. And that's all. I don't think there was any sort of intention whatsoever to bring a bias to the table.
Okay.
Whether it was intentional or unintentional.
Okay.
I was just saying I would agree with what Kelly was saying in the fact that it was straightforward and informative, not really trying to persuade their point of, or not there, but a specific point of view.
Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, I've taught world religion in the Catholic school, so I've taught Islam and Judaism and all these different religions in a Catholic school where we're supposed to be driving home Catholic beliefs and Catholic values, and there's definitely a way of presenting it without bias, just as information as the beliefs of that religion, and I think that's what they were doing. I don't think there was any bias involved, not that video at least.
Agreed. What's the saving grace in all this? What's the best ammo that the teachers and the district have for
standards? It's in the standards. They have to teach
Standards.
Yeah, it's in the state standards. It's did I cut out the? I think I tried to cut out the. I don't remember if I did or not. Where did I put this? Chatham. Social studies standard highlighted. Here we go. Somewhere I put this. I think I highlighted. Where was it? Hang on. Because this is why I started with all of the curriculum supervision and all that stuff. Why it's so important. So here is this is standard. This is social studies standard 6.2 world history global studies. By the end of grade 8, this is content statement. Under content statement 3, letter D, history, culture, and perspective. So this is 6.2.8.D.3. lowercase d. Compare and contrast the tenets of various world religions that developed in or around this time period. Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, and Taoism. Their patterns of expansion and their responses to the current challenges of globalization. There it is. I think this, as I looked through all this, I couldn't believe that everyone went crazy over this. I'm like, it's in the standards. The teacher was teaching and adhering to the state standards. Some of the people, that got up to speak made a good point about, as long as you're teaching everybody fairly. I mean, I didn't see it, but what was the one thing that was missing?
I've actually just wanted to bring to the table real quick. I've experienced this before, not on a yearly basis, but I went a couple of years in a row when I was doing inclusion world history, where I had people just gung-ho, that's separation of church and state, and they were very sensitive because of their own personal backgrounds, and they wanted nothing to do with their children on a 9th grade level being exposed to other religions in a public school setting. They were very upset about this, so we had to come up with an alternative plan for their child, and we understood, and we just came up with an alternative plan for them.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, but see, then it's almost your kid is not getting that thorough and efficient education guaranteed by the state of New Jersey, because they're not meeting that standard because they're not learning.
You're setting a precedent, because then a parent can come in about another topic that they say they don't believe in, and then you have to adjust for that. So if it's in the standards, I mean, I agree with like trying to, accommodate everyone and, parents' complaints and ideas and whatever, but when you do it for one parent, you got to do it for others too. So you don't want to set a precedent of, oh yeah, we'll change the curriculum whenever any parent has a complaint, because that's what we're doing.
I have a friend who works on the elementary school level, and they had several children between the kindergarten, first, second grade level where there was holiday type of activities that were going on, and they had to find an alternative type of activity for these children because of their beliefs and their backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So when it came time to Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day, and St. Patty's Day, and mm-hmm. so forth, these children could not partake in these type of activities due to their beliefs and their background.
Yeah, sometimes, and just as easy as I might say it's cut and dry, it's not so cut and dry. And I think that goes back to certainly why, supervising what your teachers are teaching, if you're a curriculum supervisor, is extremely important, because you want to know. You don't want to find out from a parent, by the way, your teacher's teaching something that's not in the book. You don't want to find that out after the fact. You don't want to be surprised when a parent calls you, as opposed to, reading it in the teacher's plan book, that's what's going on. What's the one thing that was missed? Let's ask question 6. Is there anything that would have been helpful to you in looking at this whole thing with the Chathams? There's one thing that I think would have, in my mind, would have been a deal breaker. There's one thing that I don't have, or at least I couldn't find. Anybody? There's one.
The teacher?
I'm sorry?
Getting the information from the teacher? Like, I was curious, like they showed this video, they linked this video that she or he used, but mm-hmm. Was there something that the teacher said in class, or a discussion, or did anyone ask the teacher what they were teaching, or?
I would assume so, but I'm looking at the outside. There's one thing that I would have liked to see, or would have liked. One thing I would have liked to have seen that I couldn't find.
The homework assignment?
Yes. The homework assignment.
I thought about that too. I thought about it too, because if it was indoctrinating Islam, I mean, through the video, I can say maybe the last few lines they could pick something at, because mm-hmm. the non-Islam boy also joins the other boy. Maybe they can pick a fight at that. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Sure.
But they didn't see the video at home. What they saw was the outcome, which is the homework assignment. That's what I would have liked to see, because for them to go as far as to say it's indoctrinating, mm-hmm. that they're trying to get their children to join a whole other religion, there has to be something on that paper to bring them to that. Or I don't know, they're out of it, but it had to really be something.
It's the one piece of the puzzle I think that I would have liked to see is, what was that? If it was an informational sheet based on the video, answer a couple of questions, I don't see anything wrong with that. Now, again, I'm an outsider, but the information that I'm seeing as a trained educator, as long as they're adhering to that standard and they're hitting all the other religions, A, I don't have a problem with that. And B, and you can feel free to disagree with me. I'm not saying that what I'm saying it has to be right, but I also know as a parent that my kids are all in public school, I see that they are very tolerant of one another. Like they don't see difference the way that older people do. And I don't know if it's a generational thing, but they are or maybe like when I went to school, I mean, I got to be diplomatic, but there was everybody. I wasn't exposed to anybody potentially ethnically or racially different from me until I was in high school. So until I was 14 years old, I went to school, and not through any fault of my own or my parents. It was just how the makeup of my class was. For the most part, it was I had maybe 3 or 4 girls that were Filipino, and that was it. And everybody else was Caucasian, American, with no real um, what's the word I want? No identification towards a specific ethnicity, and that's how I grew up. But and not to say that that made me intolerant, but my kids, I think, are exposed to a lot more ethnic diversity, racial diversity. And I think that I'm hoping that as they get older, that carries with them that kind of what they're. I do have to say, I think New Jersey schools, at least what I've seen, do a pretty good job with non-religious character education. I think my kids get the idea that, you should treat someone like you want to be treated. And whether, even though that's got its roots in a bunch of different religions, treat someone like you want to be treated. You want to be a good person. You don't want to harm anybody else. And I think they're getting that pretty good. But I do go back to all the stuff in the chat and say I would have liked to seen the homework assignment. I don't feel certainly not at this age. I don't think my kids are getting anything, one religion or one ethnicity or one anything over another. I think they're getting a very balanced education. But at the same time, I personally, as a parent, would want my kids to learn about as many different religions, ethnicities, races, everything that they can, because I think that's how they're going to be. If I want my kids to grow up to be accepting and tolerant and everything of anybody, they have to learn about it, and I think that's so important. So unless the Chathams picked, Islam, and that's the only thing that they were studying, and in violation of the other standard, I don't see anything wrong with it. Now, again, you feel free to disagree with me all you want, but that's based on the information. I'm a data kind of guy. I like to look at data before I make anything informed. But the only thing, like I said, that would make a difference to me would be that homework assignment. But I don't see anything wrong with what they did.
I think something that you said really resonated with me, that it depends on the district, because I think I told some of you in the discussion board, I work in Elizabeth, and I work in one of the most, I guess you could say, the roughest schools. And I have in my class, I teach ASL, and I have 3 Syrian refugees in my class this past year. And it kind of created a completely different environment because the kids really wanted to learn about it. And towards the end of the year, we had to do a bulletin board competition type of thing where we had to do a multicultural, we had to represent a country. So instead of choosing, a lot of the teachers chose their background. So I let the kids choose Syria because they wanted to represent their country. And as they were talking about what was going on in Syria, because they had been right in the midst of it. I mean, they were in the buildings that blew up. It was a really good learning experience for my kids, but at the same time, they were really interested in it. They were asking questions that I really didn't think would come out. I was a little concerned. I had to censor some of it. But something that stood out to me the most was one of my students who was a Syrian refugee. We were pretending that we were going to be presidents, so we were making slogan signs. And he wrote on his sign, "Be Muslim." And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not talking about the religion." And this is a second grader. And he said, I'm not telling people to be their religion. I'm telling them to act Muslim. And I said, well, how do Muslims act? And he said, peaceful. And that just, to me, that kind of, when I saw this whole thing, it just reminded me of that video. Really didn't talk about, it just talked about the values. It really didn't how to practice it. It wasn't making them practice it. So I think what you said, it really depends on the school district, because in my district, it's normal for all those cultures to come together.
Absolutely.
I actually tried to turn a blind eye and just open my ears to the video as I watched it. I actually watched it through a second time, and I just acted as though I wasn't hearing any sort of label or tag or identity from one religion or another per se. And it's just sounded like the common theme and thread that you would hear with most religions, our faith and background, morals, set of values. So, and that notion, it was pretty diplomatic in terms of, just to piggyback off what you were saying, with how we try to deal with things in New Jersey. I believe we're well trained and groomed to address our student body and our parents and our stakeholders in that type of respect by being as neutral and diplomatic as possible, being sensitive to, you know, this eclectic mix of people that we have, especially here in our state, in the tri-state metropolitan area.
I had a question about a teacher. What if a teacher had something in the lesson plan that deviated from the curriculum and for some reason was overlooked by administration, whether it's the principal or the supervisor didn't see it, and the teacher went ahead and taught it anyway? And then that came back and parents kicked up a fuss like what happened in Chatham. Who's held liable at that point?
Anybody want to take a stab at that one before I do?
My district is really interesting because we have so many schools, and our principal is not exactly, I guess you can say, physically yes, but within the classroom he's really not. So we have to submit our lesson plans to him, but to be honest, I don't think he's ever looked at a single one of them. So I think what you were asking about that, I mean, I feel like it would eventually be on a supervisor or him, even though if he didn't look at it, there's no proof to say that he looked at it, but he's supposed to be looking at them. So, I mean, if it slipped through the cracks, if it was something as bad as, you know, racism or something like that, I think the teacher would be blamed, but also the supervisors who are supposed to be monitoring, I mean, they should have some say in it as well.
I agree.
I'd say it's still on the administrator, administration and supervisor. I think, like you just said, there will be some backlash towards the teacher, but ultimately, I think it falls on the person who's supposed to be in control of the teacher.
Yeah, that's the role of the leader. They're supposed to be monitoring it and making sure that it fits the rationale and the mission of the school.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're both wrong, but I don't know.
No, I would agree too. I think ultimately it's you know, as a teacher, you know, there was that girl couple. How long ago? It wasn't that long ago. She was writing letters to was it a cop killer? You remember?
That's in my district, Orange. That's why I was actually that's what I was alluding to. Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up.
You know, like, and that was one of those that, I mean, she got fired for that. Right,
she did.
She didn't have tenure.
They rubber roomed her, and then they didn't renew her. Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
but
she was a first-year teacher.
But at the same time, so I mean, well, see, that's a tough one because like, you know, the teacher,
you should know better.
You should know better, but at the same time, where was someone else to say you should know better?
Yeah,
you know, like if I find out, even if I find out through word of mouth,
know better.
Yeah, even if I find out through word of mouth that one of my teachers is doing something outlandish, I got to have a conversation and say, hey, because you know what, my butt's on the line too here. It's not just you, you know.
But can I tell you something though? Because I guess at that school, the principal and vice principal share responsibilities for different departments, and she was actually under the purview of the vice principal. Mm-hmm. Well, that vice principal is now back in the classroom teaching. Probably not by coincidence.
No, I would say not. You know, I mean, that's why I want to try that. That's why I think a class like this is valuable, is that there are real life things that happen right in New Jersey, you know, with curriculum. A classic curriculum development is not just about writing curriculum. You know, it's about how do we, you know, for those of you that go into ed leadership, how do you supervise curriculum? How do you make sure your teachers are doing what they should be doing? And like you can't say, well, I didn't know this one was doing that. That's your fault. You're the supervisor. And how important it is to look at plans. I got away with a lot because I really didn't have that kind of oversight of people looking at my plans and whatnot. But then again, too, I didn't have any type of protection. So if I was doing something outlandish, I probably would just been, I wouldn't fired. But you really, if you're going to supervise curriculum, if you're going to be a continuity supervisor, excuse me, you need to you need to read lesson plans. You need to poke your head in, and if into classrooms and see what's going on, or at least have your ear to the floor so you know what's going on, especially if there's rumblings of something that's not that's not right. Absolutely.
Our admin is so mobile in our building, and like I said, between the handful of them, you're visited every week. Maybe not every day, but you better be on your toes every day, making sure that you're adhering to what's in that plan book, because you will be called out upon it. On the side, and it will be addressed, and there's no ifs, ands, or what's about it. It's just how business is handled in house, and like I said, we collaborate at least once a week. Your phone in your classroom will ring a few times a week, and there will be some sort of premeditated question that was planned in advance that will be a feeler of some sort. See what's going on, like they're checking in on you, and it's all good. It's just how we be effective with what we're doing, and it's very productive, if you ask me.
Yeah.
We also utilize technology as much as possible, not only through district assessments and benchmarks, your typical stuff, and the district literally purchases the SAT and PSAT for every kid to take, and it's so data driven. I mean, everything is timestamped. I mean, we have programs for the math department like Plato. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. I mean, that breaks down every single skill in the math curriculum, and every kid has to master by achieving at least an 80% to leave that skill. And until they do so, they are locked into that skill. So there are so many different ways that we utilize technology. I'm just throwing a few things out there, and I could ramble on, for a long time, but it's documented, it's time-stamped, and there's no way around it. And that's how, like I said earlier on, we had 2 teachers from 2 different departments. One teacher is gone. She's not coming back this year. And there's another teacher, I know for a fact that she's being watched, because I went through my intern 1 and 2 this year. And behind the scenes, I saw some things that I was never exposed to before. And it is what it is. They just want you to work with them so this way we can be as productive as possible, because we're in the kid business.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's I don't consider myself a total conformist, but at the same time, I'm smart enough to know that if I don't conform, I'm not going to have a job, or I'm going to be exactly as Clyde said. I'll be in the rubber room, and eventually I'll be out. So all good, relevant points. Anybody have anything else they want to add in terms of anything we said tonight about supervising the curriculum, hidden curriculum, the Chathams as a whole?
I'm kind of looking at all this because I'm not in this program for ed leadership. I'm in this program on the director of guidance track. So as a director of guidance, as a guidance counselor, whereas the supervisors are watching what teachers are doing and trying to make sure the teachers are on track. As a future guidance counselor and hopefully director of guidance, I'm looking at this. I'm supposed to be the advocate for the kid. So it's a totally different perspective of how to deal with this curriculum and the parent complaints, because as a director of guidance, I might not necessarily go right to the standards and what's in the teacher's plan book, because that's not my role as director of guidance. I'm looking at the kids' perspective and how the kids feeling and how the parents are feeling and their complaints. So it's interesting, listening to all this from you guys as the supervisor perspective and the maybe vice principal or principal perspective, but I'm also kind of trying to go through it in a totally different perspective as well as a director of guidance. A totally different role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that and you have to really think about it too, that the kids are the ultimate recipients of all this planning and supervision. And, you know, how we plan our curriculum is ultimately what the kids are going to get. So, you know, whether we're planning, if we plan with bias, if we had intentional or unintentional things that we put in the curriculum, all that has an effect on the kids. But it is, yeah, I mean, that there's a totally different angle, you know, to all this. Any other overall thoughts or?
I had a question not pertaining to, you know, it's more just a course question. So I don't
Hold
know
on one second. I'm gonna. Anybody else with anything about what we talked about before I entertain any type of regular class questions? Go ahead, Zach.
Just with the curriculum, what is it?
The map evaluation.
No, not the map. Yeah, the evaluation assignment, which was presented in this week's assignment. It's not due till week 4.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm giving you 2 weeks to do it because it's a little bit more involved. Because you're going to look at a curriculum and evaluate it based on, you know, what you see, and there's some guiding questions that I gave you. So,
but it'll be due at the end of next week, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah. Yes, beginning of week 4, so a week from Monday, approximately.
Okay. And then real quick, Kelly, I don't mean to take up everybody else's time, and real quick, you said you took the intern 1 and 2 classes last semester. Real brief, quick, what does that entail? That's just kind of following around an administrator at your current.
Yeah, actually, from I got on board a little early because our team, you know, before Labor Day, was into school working their 12-month schedule. So in August, I tried to, you know, step into school a few times a week in August and get on board and just get as much perspective as possible. But what the state asks us to do is meet at least a minimum of 150 hours. And your professor at St. Peter's asks you to maintain a binder, and they give you the guideline as to what you have to adhere to. And
that's the
it's pretty simple because you're going to work anyway.
You got to do the 150 twice. It's 300 hours. It changed when I was in the program. So you went from 150 in total to now you do 2 semesters of 150 each. So you're doing 300 hours worth of internship, which means your administration gets free labor from you. That's pretty much what it is. And exactly what Kelly said, you're going to keep a binder. They're going to give you the template, and you'll write up stuff. You'll put in stuff that you work on. It's meant for you to get exactly that, and you know, it's a learning experience of this is what an administrator does, and you could pretty much follow around. You know, you could be a principal, vice principal, supervisor, you know, anybody. So
those are that's the courses labeled 528 and 529. Is that correct? Okay.
They might give you a few assignments too, like coordinate back to school night, or you know, report card night, and a few things like that throughout, just to see how you think, what your perspective is, and what original thoughts and ideas you might want to bring to the table.
I was asking because I have them. I'm taking one in the fall, and hopefully the other one in the spring. I didn't know if they needed to be taken together.
No, they should be taken in sequence, because really what internship 1 is supposed to be, you dabble in a little bit of everything, and then internship 2 is that you take 2, 3, or 4 things that you're really interested in, then you deep dive into those. You know, like I did curriculum development. One of the things I looked at curriculum in the first one, and in 529 I was writing curriculum. You know, so that was a big like 40 hours worth of my 150 was curriculum development. I think I had schedule design. I had like only three or 4 max things that I really focused on, and that's the whole idea. And you know, the idea too is that you develop this portfolio of stuff that you could use for job interviews. You could use as a resource when you get into an administrative job. You know, some places will have you plan events. You might take minutes of meetings. You know, I did that as a graduate assistant 20 years ago. I took, you know, college curriculum committee minutes. But that was a good skill. I mean, that's stuff that I really was. I was glad that I learned how to do. So the internship, believe it or not, it's helpful. I don't get what that second 150 hours is going to give you more than the first 150 hours, but that's what the state wants. So
It's almost better to take them separate because together it sounds like it'd be a little bit too much.
Yeah, I mean, 150 you're looking at, that would be up roughly 4, right? 4, yeah, 4 weeks of 9 to 5 work just on internship. So it's 4 full weeks of 8-hour days.
My
now,
school,
obviously,
for example,
can't do
they
that.
didn't want us to work during the day. So what I did was I took the advice of my one VP. I worked with the whole team. My one VP had suggested, off of something that he had observed from the other 2 interns who came before me, which was to, he couldn't tell me what time to come in, but we have a little history there, and he had suggested that, you know, if you can make it in at 6, 6:15, 6:30, that's when he comes in, and here we are. There's nothing to question, nothing to ask. Here we are. Let's roll up our sleeves and rock and roll. And then I stay a little bit late anyway, an hour, 2 hours, depending on the day, sometimes even 3 hours because of certain programs that I help with and whatnot. So it was just a natural, seamless day-to-day thing, and it just fell right into place. And
all right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry, other guys.
No, not at all.
Don't.
Anybody else with anything, the questions, comments, concerns, anything at all, while you have me as a captive audience?
The one quiz is 70 points. The other ones are all like a lot less. Is that
No, that's which one is which one is 70 points?
Hold on, I'll
please,
tell you right now.
Yeah, tell me. This is why I shouldn't do work. I shouldn't do work late at night.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4 is worth 7. No, that's. Oh yeah, look at that. Somebody got you shouldn't be getting a grade of a 50. Hold on. Oh, let's see. Chapter 4.
I was getting nervous when I was going to get to the Chapter 4 one that it was going to take like.
This is why, you know what? Not so much with this class, but I think when I did the principles and problems in June, I couldn't get anything right. Anything that I posted on Blackboard was wrong for whatever reason.
Give yourself more credit. You were.
Oh
fine.
no! Oh yeah, no. That's nice of you. But no, I couldn't. I just couldn't get my act together. Chapter 4 quiz. Yeah, and this is fine. If you come across stuff like this, you just got to tell me, and I'd be more than happy. Oh, 7 questions. Yeah, 10 points. Look at that. Oh, that's not good. Okay. Let's make them 1 point apiece. Update and regrade. There we go. 7 questions, 7 points. Much better. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I probably would have figured it out eventually when I looked at the grade book. Your like I said, your class is moving at a much more rapid pace, so I got to make sure I keep up with your grading. I said they're generally like there are times where like I'll put my kids, everybody goes to bed, and then I might stay up and grade or whatever, and there are times I fall asleep on it. So that was probably one of those nights. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? Anything about class? Anything? Assignments, due dates? While you still have me as a captive live audience, this is the last time you'll see me in person, unless you need to.
For the curriculum evaluation assignment, you don't want us to go through and answer the questions. You want it like a.
You can. Well, that's up to you. You can write a paper. You could go through and answer them as questions. You could add and modify some of those questions. The question meant as a guide.
So if we went through the numbers and just went, 1 through whatever you have 10 questions there.
I'm okay with that. It should be a. I never try to give any assignment that's meaningless. The idea behind that is that you can look at a piece of curriculum or look at a specific subject, whatever, and be able to say, oh, it's written well, it's developed well, it's got objectives, it's student oriented, all this kind of stuff. Because there might be a time as a curriculum supervisor, you might be looking at curriculum that's not in your area, but you still have to understand it and see if it's good. So, anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? If there are none, I will be the last person to leave the hangout, but I bid you a good night. Keep up the good work. If anything comes up, you need to make me aware of anything, please do so. Other than that, I will have the link for the class if you want to watch the rerun up probably tomorrow. I will send you a note when that is done. And if there's nothing else, I bid you all good night. Thanks for coming and discussing, and I will talk to you all soon.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Right.
Good night.